limit is y goes to 0 of sine squared of y over cosine squared of y plus cosine of y minus 2. The first thing we're going to do is try plugging a 0 in for each of the y's. In the numerator, that'll give us sine of 0 squared. In the denominator, that'll give us cosine of 0 squared plus cosine of 0 minus 2. The sine of 0 is a 0, so we have a 0 squared over the cosine of 0 is a 1, so we have 1 squared plus 1 minus 2. 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1, plus 1 minus 2. So we have 0 over 1 plus 1 is 2, minus 2 is also a 0. We have the 0 over 0 indeterminate form. We will need to rework this. Since we have power functions of trig, we can try the factor and cancel method just like we would with power functions. But we have mismatched trig functions right now. In the numerator we have sine squared of y, in the denominator we're having a trinomial quadratic of cosine. So the first thing we will want to do is make use of the Pythagorean trig identity, solve it for sine squared of y, and that will give us 1 minus cosine squared of y. And we're going to replace the numerator with 1 minus cosine squared of y. Why that helps us is that is a difference of squares and will factor, and the denominator is a trinomial quadratic with the same trig function cosine, and will therefore also factor, and we should be able to do a factor and cancel. So we have in the numerator 1 plus cosine of y and 1 minus cosine of y. Since the cosine of y, which is going to 0, cosine of 0 is a 1, it's the 1 minus cosine y that's actually making the 0 in the numerator. Now down in the denominator we have a trinomial quadratic involving cosine. So we have a cosine of y, and we need two numbers that multiply to be a negative 2 and add to be a positive 1. So that sounds like it'll be a positive 2 and a negative 1. At this point we can see the two factors that are making zeros. It's 1 minus cosine y in the numerator and it's cosine y minus 1 in the denominator. They're opposite signs of each other, and so they cannot cancel just yet. So our next step should be to factor a negative out of one of them. I'll just factor out of the one in the numerator. And that negative can be written at the very beginning, but it reverses the signs of the cosine and the 1 in the second factor there. In the denominator we will just leave it alone because we have matching forms that are making 0 over 0. At this point those can cancel each other out, which means we should no longer have the 0 over 0 indeterminate form. So I'm just going to rewrite what we have left. And our next step is we should be able to plug 0 in for the remaining y's. That will give us negative of 1 plus the cosine of 0 divided by the cosine of 0 plus 2. The cosine of 0 is a 1, so we'll have negative of 1 plus 1 divided by 1 plus 2. So we will have the negative of 1 plus 1 is a 2 over 1 plus 2 is a 3.